Hey everybody, welcome back to Lettermen Row. I am Austin Ward. That's Jeremy Birmingham, and over there is Spencer Holbrook. The Big Ten has a schedule. Ohio State knows who it's supposed to play and when it is supposed to play them. That's good news. It's all tentative, of course, and it's a very strange formula for putting this together with collapsible bye weeks and multiple dates to shift canceled games and rescheduled games and flexibility in December for a Big Ten championship game that could be any of 3 weekends, but who cares about any of that? Let's just pretend like this schedule is going to be played, Berm.
Yeah, let's just dive into it. Open on the road at Illinois. Lovie Smith's program is hoping to be revitalized on the strength of some transfers, and a Thursday night game in the Big Ten doesn't happen often, but it did happen, 4 years ago now for Ohio State when they opened at Indiana. So September 3rd, let's get it, right? We're less than a month away. Camp is starting tomorrow? So it's full speed ahead.
That's the weird part. We had headlines and graphics and everything for September 5th. Like, that's been the date that's been focused on over and over. And then you get this Thursday night banger. It caught us all off guard. So we apologize to everybody who saw that initially. We're just, we were so excited to get that September 5th game, and now we get it 2 days earlier. I certainly didn't think that was coming. So that was obviously the first thing that jumped out. And then number two was looking for where the game is. And Spencer, we talked about it, and I know Berm's already weighed in. That game could be played at any time, but October 24th for the game. What do you think?
It doesn't truly matter when it's played, and I think that's like the biggest thing. Like Berm said, I think anybody would agree with that. I think it being at the beginning of the season would have been bad now that I look at the schedule and everything, but October 24th is interesting. It's right in the middle of the schedule. I think it's actually at a good time for Ohio State. Not that any time is a bad time because Ohio State's won 8 straight. So, they could play in March, and I don't think anybody would care. But I think it's a good time for Ohio State to play Michigan. October 24th is kind of like a good fall date. It's going to feel just like football season. I know that doesn't matter either, but I think this is going to be good for both sides. October 24th has a good feel to it.
And I know people are already asking, does this open the door for it to be played at night? That game will not be played at night.
No, especially because it's game 2 of the World Series that day. So let's avoid that if it's going to be on Fox.
But there's other reasons, Bern. Like, the teams don't want to get rid of that tradition. They like playing the game at noon. Fox owns the broadcast rights. They put out a graphic as soon as they possibly could to make sure that everyone knew that because they have the World Series and because they've made such an emphasis on the big noon kickoff. That's the way it is. Big games are going to be at noon. I know people love primetime games, but even especially this year with what the Big Ten will be trying to do for safety protocol, I would imagine that most games are going to be noon or 3:30 just to allow teams to get home as quickly as possible. I wouldn't anticipate a lot of big primetime games for anybody this year. We'll see how that plays out with a Thursday trip to Illinois, but that's beside the point.
You can play that game at 11 a.m. on Thursday. Nobody's going to care. I think the thing that people are going to ask is why, if the Ohio State-Iowa game is scheduled for November 21st, why not just schedule Michigan for that day? But, again, ultimately it doesn't matter, whether that's because they want to make sure it happens and they think the earlier in the season, the more likely something is to happen, or that's just the date that Ohio State and Michigan both had available based on moving the schedule when they initially probably had them on the 28th of November. It doesn't really matter. It's Justin Fields and Wyatt Davis said on Tuesday, the Buckeyes are ready to play them whenever, and we'll see if they can beat the brakes off of Michigan as those guys had intended. But, I think that the good thing for people here is to understand that the plan is there. It's what we talked about last week, Austin, it's these little markers along the way. Like, is there reason to be optimistic? Is there reason to think this can happen? The Big Ten going ahead and setting out the schedule this morning, including Rutgers on it, as they did, despite the fact that the Scarlet Knights are not going to be practicing tomorrow like Ohio State is, or probably not for the next 2 weeks. You have to know things are going to change, but the commitment to playing a schedule remains.
September 12th in the Horseshoe, that's supposed to be the home opener for the Buckeyes. Rutgers is listed as the opponent. I think that there is a 0% chance that game is actually going to happen at that point. It seems unlikely that Rutgers is going to be able to play before week 3 at the earliest. We'll have to see. Maybe I shouldn't be that bold. How about a 1% chance that game happens? You can't rule it out entirely because I'm not sure what 2 weeks of practice actually makes any difference for Greg Schiano's program anyway. When you look at the West here, so you had to add one more crossover game for the Buckeyes and everybody else in the Big Ten. I think it's a juicy West schedule for anybody that wants a little revenge against Purdue and Iowa. The opportunity, both of those exist. The Buckeyes don't get Minnesota or Wisconsin, so if they're going to play one of those teams, that would be in the Big Ten championship game. I think most people would be happy with what the Buckeyes got here from the West.
Yeah, I would agree. But I think, that trip to Purdue is going to be way different than the normal trips to Purdue. So just calm down. You take a deep breath. It's not going to be like the other trips to Purdue. Iowa to end the season is interesting to me, but I don't think they'll actually end the season with Iowa. I think that could be Rutgers could go to the end of the schedule because I don't see a bye week where that matches up. So the West schedule is interesting for Ohio State because you play Nebraska every year now, it seems like, or do they play them every year? You play Iowa now, you play Purdue now, but like you said, missing Wisconsin and Minnesota gives you a little bit of breathing room when it comes to playing against the West. That's how I feel about it. I think, when you don't play Minnesota and you don't play Wisconsin, those are kind of body blow games, especially Wisconsin. And I think it's in Ohio State's favor to not draw either of them.
I almost heard Austin say revenge tour.
I did not
almost
say
said it.
Oh, no.
He was this close to saying it. Obviously,
Purdue, this is a team that might actually be able to finish a revenge tour.
The Purdue is an interesting game, as we talked about last week. Again, like that's the one that made the most sense. If you're going to add a 10th, week inside of the conference, that's the one that's closest to home. There's obviously some intrigue, so there's no doubt why you add that one. Minnesota, Wisconsin. Who knows what's going to happen in the season? But those two are our lead choices, I think, to end up playing in a Big Ten championship game. So I think it's a great slate. If you're talking about Ohio State having to prove that they belong in the conversation for one of the country's best teams, I think this schedule is going to be challenging. I think that it's going to be a schedule that really puts the Buckeyes against it. They still get Michigan State and Michigan back-to-back. They still get Penn State at the end of the year in November in Happy Valley, regardless of if there's fans or not. So, there's some quagmires to navigate.
I mean, that's the way it works now. If the Big Ten, if you want the league to be great, then your schedule gets a lot more challenging. I think especially this year, we still haven't heard much about what the college football playoff will do. But whoever wins the Big Ten, I think, has to be in that conversation every single year. So we'll see how the Buckeyes can navigate this. They now know the 10 teams that they are supposed to play if they're going to win the Big Ten this year. Conference-only slate. An interesting schedule with a lot of flexibility built in. We'll see exactly how this all works once it gets here. But the Buckeyes now know that they are expected to start on Thursday, September 3rd at Illinois. However, we will be allowed to cover that. We'll do that at Lettermen Row. This has been Rapid Reaction, brought to you by Byers Auto. If you're looking to buy an auto, choose Byers Auto. That's Jeremy Birmingham and Spencer Holbrook. I'm Austin Ward. Stay with us at Lettermen Row for full coverage of Ohio State in the 2020 football season.